My name is Peter Kannam, and I'm really excited to spend the next hour or so with you all talking about designing industry partnerships. And I'm going to warn you, I'm going to do a little Oprah thing or Phil Donahue or whomever. I'm going to kind of be circulating and talking to you guys as well because I really want to engage you in this conversation. We have some experts here, but also want to hear from you about how do you design an effective industry partnership? What's the criteria that we've learned to have an effective one? What do we want to gain from it? And we have some great examples of people. The last 10 minutes, just so you know, I see a lot of people with their laptops. We're going to move to doing a survey. We're doing kind of in every breakout session, we're going to be doing feedback loops. So just so you know, I'll be just to kind of preview that coming up. But before I begin, I'll just take a second and say my name is Peter Kannam. I'm one of the proud co-founders with John Schnurr of America Achieves. We started it back about 6 years ago now. And I've been to every global learning network convening. And so I'm proud to say, and it's great to see such great representation here. I work as a senior advisor for the organization now, helping on special projects. I'm also a vice chairman of the Baltimore City School Board, which is, for those who from outside the United States, Baltimore City, 84,000 students, $1.3 billion budget, 200 schools, and we're mostly students in need and trying to make trying to deliver an excellent education for all those students. And so I've just been recently, I've been on the board for 5 years there, so I'm actually wanting to learn as much from you all as well. And I'm just thrilled to have, we've got some great practitioners. You'll notice in the breakout sessions, it's now you all having a conversation with each other, like the experts that are practitioners in the field, thinking about, how sharing promising practices. And so I have the, because I think they'll be too humble, I'm going to kind of tell you who our panelists here. We have an esteemed panel of first Miss Jayda Spillers from, and you want Jayda's first. Thanks, Jayda. She's the Career Technical Education Supervisor for Bossier Parish Schools in Louisiana, our great state of Louisiana, where as well as the principal of Bossier Parish School for Technology and Innovative Learning. Prior to her administrative duties, Jayda was a business teacher in both middle and high school with experience in Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana. As a high school teacher, she served as a school-to-work coordinator. And so she's just an incredible resource and practitioner. And then we have Dr. Ryan Jackson from the Mount Pleasant Arts and Innovation Zone. And we've heard you've been very actively participating. And he liked me on Twitter. So if anybody's on Twitter, please, like me. I'm P. Kannam, Kannam. I'm not afraid to do a shameless plug. I'm in a competition with somebody to get more followers. So please, P. Kannam. And thank you, Ryan, for following me. But Ryan's done some incredible things at the Mount Pleasant Arts and Innovation Zone, America's first and only pre-K through 12 STEAM campus. And he talked about that earlier today. But what I was really remarkable, these kind of partnerships, and I want to hear about them, with Parker Hannafin. I want you to describe who they are. NASA, Sanofi, Pharmaceuticals, the Omar College in Design, and the Berklee School of Music, which is based in Boston. So I'm very interested. I had a friend who go to Berklee School of Music down the road here, and he has a partnership in Tennessee. But also the NASA, what you've got going on in NASA, seems really, really interesting. And so Ryan's got a lot to share about this innovative model that he's put together, and previously served 10 years at Maplewood High School in Nashville, Tennessee as an English teacher, dean of students, graduation coach, assistant principal. You've done a little bit of everything. And then we're really joined to have some international representation from Adam Robb, from an Albertan teacher, program developer who believes that students deserve to have a chance to design solutions with the result in stronger and more resilient communities. He's led students in becoming co-designers for the first sustainable modular classroom. He called it the SEED project, so I want to hear, I'm looking forward to hearing about that. And he's won a bunch of awards as a Future Hero Award, an Alberta Excellence in Teaching Award. He just seems like an incredible, incredible educator. So welcome. We're so glad you're here. So what I want to do is get a sense of the crowd. This is a small enough group. Can we just go around just real quickly and say who's here? Like, so your name and, like who you represent. It'll only take a couple minutes. It's always helpful to know who we're talking to. So do you want to go around?
Good afternoon, panelists. Joanne Caddy from UBC.
Wonderful. Hi, Joanne.
I am Cody Blackburn. I'm the high school principal at STEM School Hines Ranch in Denver, Colorado.
I'm Catherine Secret Cloud, assistant principal at the Career and Technology Center in Colorado.
Hello, I'm Stephen Weber. I'm principal at Bethlehem High School, right outside New Orleans, Louisiana.
New Orleans, okay.
And I'm David Schechter. I'm the assistant at Bethlehem High School.
Mm-hmm.
Larry Alexander, Louisiana Department of Education. John Levin, the Academy Coach at Bethlehem High School.
Ivy Murray, principal of the West School of Math, Science, and Technology.
John Campbell, I'm with these guys.
Well, I had the pleasure of having lunch with, and you said 200 industry partnerships that you have for his juniors and seniors in Gwinnett. And this school is incredible, this math and science and technology school, but 200 industry partnerships, has 2 full-time people dedicated to securing partnerships and internships for his 11th and 12th graders. So I want you to actively participate and share with us as well on how we do that. So. Great. Welcome from Milwaukee. All right. Memphis. Okay. Hi. Oh, great. We want to hear how you can help inform how we do effective partnerships here. So thanks for joining. Texas, okay.
Shaughnessy, Director Academic Career Advising, Colorado Early Colleges, and College, Colorado.
Paul Stephan, curriculum coordinator at International School of Zoom, CERN, in Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Josh Hitchens, I'm the manager cluster coordinator at Science and Community Magazine in Dallas.
Wonderful.
I'm Gordon McIntyre. I'm the deputy head of school at Moderator School in West Vancouver and IB Teaching School.
Great.
Hi, I'm Adrian Jervis. I'm at the Bavarian International School, K through 12.
Where?
The Bavarian International School is in Germany.
Yeah, Bavaria. I just didn't hear. Yeah, gotcha. Great.
He's assistant principal now as a math student, Department of Mental Education.
Great, great. Now you're in trouble because you're in the 3rd row back. So you got to come join Mary. We don't want you to get in trouble.
He's a
You might have to
Baptist kind of guy. That's a Tennessee thing. But,
it's a Tennessee thing. He's in the
scoot
corner.
up, man.
He's got a timeout. Okay, so here's my goal for this session, that we all can kind of think about what a criteria is like around effective industry partnerships. What do we learn? Why do we do all this work? We want it to be helping our students kind of advance the ball and kind of be like to be core to what we do instead of an add-on that can be a distraction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with our panelists to kind of really outline that. And at the beginning, I'm just going to ask each of them, the question, why have you made the formation? And I just want you all to start thinking, because I'm going to start calling on you too, just to kind of share what you've learned. Think about questions, but then also it's not just about hearing from them. It's also about sharing what you've learned as well. So why don't I just go down the line with Jayda with the first one, just saying why have you made the formation of industry partnerships such a integral part of your school model? And feel free to just take a step back and explain your school and your context, and then say why are you investing your time in industry partnerships.
Well, good afternoon, I guess, at this point. I would say I'm at a career and technical education high school, and so business and industry are what drive our curriculum. Just to kind of give you set the stage a little bit about what it is. We have everything from welding, automotive, law studies, health occupations programs like nursing, your first responder, and so forth. And so what we're doing is working with our students to training those fields. Our teachers come from business and industry, so that's the first line of business and industry partners in our school. All these teachers worked a number of years in those fields, and they have earned a number of industry certifications. And so they come in and they're continuing to teach the students to transition on into those fields at some point. Now, kind of back up a little bit, sometimes we hear people say, well, that's great, you have a school where students are not going to go to college. That's furthest from the truth, because a number of these students are also earning dual credit with college as well as their high school credits. And so it gives the students the opportunity to decide, am I going to transition right into the workforce with a number of the, what we have are statewide industry-based certifications, or will I continue in a post-secondary endeavor, whether it's a community college, a technical college, or a four-year university? And so that was just the basis for us of why we need business and industry as a integral part of that. We need them to look at that curriculum. Are we teaching what is cutting edge in that industry? We want to stay on top of industry. Are we focusing on the right certifications in those fields? Are we using the right equipment? That's a big deal for us, to come in and look and see, are we up to date on what standards are? So that would be what was our driving force behind having that business and industry interaction with our programs.
Great, thank you. Ryan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, great. I can speak to so many of those points. I think to build on top of that, I'm the executive lead principal of a pre-K through 12, and really now pre-K through 14, because this past September, we just put the Tennessee College of Applied Technology in our community center, which sits at the hub of our campus. So, I'm leading students ages 3 through 19, 20, essentially. And I start to tell our story, and people will oftentimes assume that we are either a charter school or, some type of private school or specialty school. We are just a humble public campus that serves a very rural population in Murray County, Tennessee. All that being said, why do we need these types of industry partnerships? Quite frankly, we need all the help that we can get. Specifically to kind of take a different approach. I liken it back to, and I was having this conversation earlier, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We want students to be their best. That's the constant conversation, to be your best. Maslow called it self-actualization. We want them to be their best. We do a pretty good job of meeting those bottom rungs, right? The physiological needs, the safety and security needs. Where the ball starts to officially drop is once you get to the rung of belonging, making kids feel like they belong, which in turn turns into efficacy. So if you start talking about new age industry partnerships and truly empowering students with both career mentors or industry mentors, but also empowering them with, practical or pragmatic, community-based or globally inspired projects that they can work on alongside these industry partners, you start to not only make them feel like they belong to some of that industry, but also to the school and this new culture that you're creating, but they also tend to gain that sense of efficacy that pushes them towards self-actualization. I would also add another layer, and I was having this conversation earlier too. I pride myself on positioning the Mount Pleasant Arts Innovation Zone as a self-sustaining campus, meaning I want to ask less and less of my superintendent, our school board, even the community at large necessarily, because we want to be able to self-fund, self-finance what we're doing. So this past June, when we received a $500,000 Innovation Lab grant from Parker Hannafin, to me, that was a testament of the culmination of what these kind of industry partnerships can look like, where you have to ask very little of school boards that are already strapped for cash because you're going out with this entrepreneurial spirit. So we always talk about modeling, expectations for students. So if we want our students to be self-sustaining, self-sufficient, we too, I think, as school leaders need to model that kind of approach. And when you attract these kind of industry partnerships that not only empower students through experiential learning models, but also, show them that, if you go out and your vision is strong enough, and we talked about that digital versus presentation or the personal approach. If you can sell that vision to these industry leaders, then you too can be self-sufficient, reach efficacy, reach self-actualization. I think that's a huge reason why you bring in industry partners into a school setting.
Well, yeah, you're adding that to even our original question, the purpose of education, that you feel like you can connect them through with self-actualization.
Absolutely.
Okay, Adam, what's your take? Why we're going to get into the components of an effective industry partnership, but tell me the why for you.
Okay, well, greetings first of all, and to my esteemed panelists. I do not feel worthy. I'm a lowly high school teacher. I will talk a lot about the industry partnerships that I form with my students as a way to be self-sustaining in our own classroom. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge, as industry practice, we always try and practice this with our students, that this is the traditional territory of the Massachusetts Indigenous tribes, and there's evidence of them being in this area for over 9,000 years, and they were wiped out by smallpox, as many of our Indigenous tribes were, or persecuted and put into concentration camps on islands out in the ocean there. So I say this because we are going through a period of truth and reconciliation in Canada. I'm from Treaty 7 territory, which is the traditional home of the Blackfoot Confederacy. And by acknowledging this, I am acknowledging our relationship to the land, but also our respect and acknowledgement of Indigenous peoples of this land. So we do this as industry practice. This is regular practice we do, everyone from oil and gas companies to environmental NGOs. And so we try and have students aware of this and practice this as often as possible. So so industry partnerships, the reason we got into this is because it makes learning far more engaging. And that's basically all there is to it. It makes learning real. There's a whole lot of problems out there, and there's a whole lot of people working on issues, whether it has to be environmental issues, social issues, and there's a lot of good people working on these things, and I want to throw my students right into the middle of these real problems. And so we seek out, according to what students are interested in, to give them a chance to try and see how an expert problem solves, how they learn, how excited expert is about learning in their own field. And I find that learning is often most contagious. I work with industry partners because I am not an expert in anything, basically. And I think that my expertise is in motivating kids to want to learn more. And so the best way to do that is to connect them. And so we work with government agencies as high up as the federal government to NGOs at the very small community level. We work with big industry companies and First Nation communities in our area as well. So it's just the most engaging way to get students to come into class every day, working with real people with real money, with real issues.
That's great. It's engagement. You talked about engagement. Ryan, you talked about self-actualization and really motivation and excitement for students. Why don't we go back to Jayda? I want each one of you to think of one really concrete industry partnership that has worked, like you feel like is effective. Tell me, break it down, who is it? How did it come about? And then the big question is, how do you know it's effective? And then just as a preview, I'm going to say which one missed the mark. I'm going to talk about that as we think about what a criteria could be to having a good a partnership. So can you take us through an example?
An example I think of right off is we have an automotive body repair program. The teacher that came in, kind of getting it off the ground a little bit, started working with a collision repair association. That's a kind of a key sometimes, finding associations that are in those fields in a region. And they would come into the class, and he would ask them to come in and do little clinics of things with the students, things that maybe he wasn't feeling like he was the expert in, and giving that opportunity for that expert to present that and to teach. And so it started a little bit with that way, and them also looking at our curriculum and giving us some good feedback. But then it went on and moved into an opportunity to do internships. The teacher would take students along and raise their level. They might become auto body repair 1, 2, 3, or 4. And at a certain point, the teacher felt like this student's really getting it. They really want to do something in this. So using those business partners, say, do you mind if we place a student with you and do a little work a couple of days a week during class? And that's their class work, what they're learning. And so we started doing that. And a most recent example of a student, we talked about those soft skills earlier in the session we were in. That's one thing that we focus on real well at our school. We hammer that in. The employer noticed during the internship time that the student not only had the skills, but was exercising some of those soft skills and things that he was doing, staying beyond time and really absorbing, being an independent learner and all. And told our teacher, when I have a position open, it's going to be that student's. And that did just happen a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's a very successful story of using that business and industry partner to help grow the program, and then to take the program beyond by allowing the student to work on the job, and then eventually that student attaining employment.
That's a great example. Is that just a follow-up question? Is the goal for exposure at the industry partnership do you have I guess I want to, as we go through our examples, explore, like, do you have an expectation that you'd want internships or apprenticeships even that would evolve out of this? Is the goal just exposure at first, and then, like you said, grow into something? When do you establish that? Do you establish that as the expectation in the front end, or do you kind of build that partnership and grow,
I believe you need to build the partnership and grow. One of the things, and I might be answering one of your questions down the road, but advice is when you go and you start working on building advisories, is have your game plan before you go to that employer, and kind of have some of these ideas in your mind. Is that what you want to have happen? You need to think it out, because business industry, they want to help you. They want to be involved. They just do not know how, and they need you to tell them what your expectations are for that program, if you're only focusing on one program or your school-wide. But again, having that game plan right up front and telling them what the expectations, which you would like to eventually see happen, and then allowing them to work with you. Sometimes we tend to take over those things and not seek that input from those business advisories, and that can handicap you. So yeah, but I think ultimately at the end, sometimes those internships would be a very good result of that.
Result. All right, Ryan, take us through. You had a lot of examples I rattled off. I'm interested in a couple of them when I gave you your introduction, but you choose. You have the NASA one, you have the Parker Hannafin one. You've got some great things going on there. Tell us how do they come about, and what's the goal?
I'd be remiss if I didn't thread this particular example with the story of Mount Pleasant itself. So I believe it's relevant. So I'm gonna tell it. This is truly a small town America underdog story. Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, was the phosphate capital of the world for approximately 100 years. And when that started to dry up, when that industry started to dry up and ultimately dried up by the early 90s, a city of about 4,700 people saw a 25% unemployment rate. And that was really before the methamphetamine epidemic came in and just kind of leveled the city and the surrounding areas. And I'm sitting in here today with, my managing principal here in the room, who's Mount Pleasant born and raised. So if you need to vet this, just ask the man that lived through it. He'll tell you. So the idea then becomes, how does a school system, how does a city resurrect itself? Well, it needs all the help that it can get. And I came in a year and a half ago and was charged with not only leading, this mini school system in the right direction, but also using the schools as a catalyst to revitalize the city itself. So when I first got down there, we're walking through the halls of my brand new building, and I see this random banner that's hanging in the hallway by itself. And Eric Hughes was there with me as we were walking by, and I asked him, what is this banner? It had a funny word on it, Clarkor, in all caps, Clarkor. And he said, that is a local industry that's nearby that believe donated some money at some point. I said, take me to this Clarkor. So we go to Clarkor, which is now called Parker Hannafin. Mm-hmm. We go to Clarkor, and I meet a man named Ryan Pastrana, Vice President of Innovation for Clarkor. And I'm going to tie this into to the benefits and all of it. But I believe this is relevant because if you're truly talking about developing these kind of partnerships, ultimately it starts with relationships. It starts with how you position your vision and how these companies can attach themselves to your vision. So as I'm meeting with Ryan Pastrana, and he's clearly upset from the beginning of the meeting because Clarkor had given about $10,000 to the school previously, and according to him, those funds were misappropriated for other things. So I'm having to finesse this relationship from literally day one, from the first time I met him. And trying to break the ice, I told him that I was kind of on my heels right now, struggling to find an Algebra 1 teacher way out here in Mount Pleasant. Instantly, I see a shift in his body language, and he even kind of gives a laugh, saying how hard it was for him as the world headquarters R&D division, of a company, to hire the brightest minds in the country to come to Mount Pleasant. So we shared a bond on that. And it was out of that conversation that we started talking about what it takes to recruit and retain, high-quality employees, and what that looks like from the school's level. So he and I, just through this initial conversation, started talking about, well, if you're going to recruit someone from Silicon Valley or come all the way from San Francisco to Mount Pleasant, the first question they ask is, where is Mount Pleasant? The second question they want to know is, what are the schools like? And I told Ryan, I said, wouldn't it be an incredible pitch if you could say, not only are the schools in Mount Pleasant awesome, we're in the schools. I said, let's put an innovation lab inside Mount Pleasant High School that mirrors the innovation lab of Parker Hannafin. Then the conversation turned to, we can farm out some of our low-level CAD work and have your students doing externships alongside Parker Hannafin or Clarkor engineers, literally learning this experiential learning pieces, on-site, on-the-job training with our experts. And from there, this whole thing just started to grow and build. He brings his executive team over to the school. They start vetting us from the beginning. I show him a space that was previously, had old busted workout equipment and broken trophies in it. It was just cluttered with old archaic desks. And then I said, no, visualize what this could be. So he brings another team of architects out and starts, doing a cost analysis of what that would look like. We go a whole year of this courtship, this vetting process. We're in between there, before they give us a nickel, he starts to send over, his engineers, his experts, his industry experts that start mentoring our students on this project here, this project there, working on our escape room PBL that turned out to be this massive project that we had, or looking at our VEX robotic kits, or partnering with Santa Fe on this amphibious drone Zika virus project that we wanted to do. But as the industry experts and Clarkor guys started to work even closer with both my mechatronics teacher, and that's another segue here. An anecdote to this is our district had doubled down on 2 programs, mechatronics and Project Lead the Way, and the God's honest truth, they didn't know what to do with either of them. So once I got them, I had to figure this thing out. And part of figuring that out was leveraging the expertise of these engineers from Clarkor to help us build this program, which speaks to exactly to what she was saying. You know, these industries want to be a part of the conversation, but they don't want, you know, they don't want to just give a handout. It goes back to Daniel Pink's 3 keys to motivation: autonomy, purpose, and mastery. The industry and their industry leaders want the exact same kind of thing, to be motivated. How can we help you build these programs, right? What is your specific vision that ties in with our purpose? And then how can we work alongside you, that mastery component of constantly striving for something better, constantly helping your students push towards this global perspective? So we literally joined hands in this kind of quote-unquote unofficial partnership, you know, until we got to a position where Junior Achievement, which is a national organization, asked Clarkor, who was in the process of being acquisitioned by Parker Hannifin, so now I'll refer to them as Parker Hannifin, who was asking Parker Hannifin to be one of their, one of their industry leaders in their little experiential learning thing they do at schools. And Parker Hannifin said, we won't do that in Nashville, but we will do that in Mount Pleasant. So we leveraged our partner to get Junior Achievement to come all the way from Nashville to little old Mount Pleasant that they'd never heard of. They'd never been in Murray County, period, to do not just a 9th grade STEM summit, but a 2nd grade through 11th grade STEAM summit with Parker Hannifin as the biggest backer. That ended up turning into something really incredible, got all kinds of press coverage, and it was because of that vetting piece that Parker Hannifin then turned around and gave us the $500,000 Innovation Lab grant. You know, all of that suffice to say, what it showed me was you have to, as a building leader, become the face of your organization. You have to be willing to build those relationships with the industry leaders. You have to sell a strong vision, get them to sink their teeth into that vision, and then be willing to invite them into the architectural process of what it is you're trying to build in terms of this vision. And that has been the key hallmark for our success with Parker Hannifin.
That's a great example, and telling the narrative and the story is helpful because, again, one of the goals here is the design principles of what does it take to have an effective industry partnership. And I've just taken some notes. I'm going to turn to Adam in a second. But things that we have so far is like a concrete game plan, know what you want. Both of you illustrated a point where, it starts with relationships. You gotta invest time on the front end. I mean, the amount of time, the net which you are right now, you said a year's worth of time in developing that relationship, but you had a vision for it as well. I think this is really important from what both of you said. It's meeting their need. It's not just because it's meeting their need, but you had a game plan. I think that's really important. As well. And then both of you illustrated examples that it grew over time. So there is this question of, do you have hey, here's what I need from an industry partner, and here's my expectations, here's my lists, and does that turn people off? Or do you come in and you build relationships, you get a toehold in, and then you have a vision for what this could look like, and it seems like it's more of a snowball that happens. That both of you illustrated. But how about you, Adam? An effective partnership. And what I love about your stories is it's really student-driven. And so, I don't know, maybe from the student perspective, share an effective partnership.
Sure, yeah. And I'll start at the end of the story where we've created something where our students are sought out by industry and community members for authentic youth engagement on whether it's design projects in the community or whether it's active stewardship roles, things like this. So it's gotten to this point where we are this lightning rod, and the students that come to see us are sought out by external organizations. So
that's
it's
cool.
kind of, but it's taken a long time to get there, right? So, and it started, I'll tell a story as well, if that's okay. When I started teaching many moons ago, it was really frustrating to see these big concepts being taught without any grounding to them. And so I wanted students to learn about concepts like globalization through their own community and the design of their own community. So what I did was, in the small town where I started my teaching in Jasper, Alberta, I had the students work on what was happening in the town right then, which was a community visioning of a strategic management plan for the next 30 years. And who better to have input on the plan for the community in the next 30 years than the students themselves, who were going to be the business owners and stewards of that place. So they did this amazing job. They jumped right into the project. I had 60 kids working on this project, interviewing locals, different stakeholders. We went through this whole process, worked with urban planners, made videos. They constructed models. You can probably picture it in your head of what they wanted their small town to look like in 30 years. Then when the official plan, community plan, came out, was published, the municipal plan, none of their ideas were taken into the official plan. But a picture of them appeared on page 142 in the top left-hand corner, and they said, youth engagement, check. So they had officially engaged youth in the process of the development of this plan. And this may sound familiar to some people out there, but there's youth engagement, and then there's authentic youth engagement, where they're not just tokens, they're not just like, it's kind of like lining up minorities or people of color in a picture to say, yep, we are diverse, yep, we have youth engagement. It's not real. So I learned from that, because that was an absolute failure. The kids came away from that experience saying, I'm never going to get involved with my community again. And I was like, ooh, that probably wasn't the outcome I was looking for as a teacher. Oops. So then we went to the next level, and we had the students tell their story on a bigger stage. So we went down, I asked some colleagues what the biggest stage we could possibly find would be, and it was the Living Future Institute holds a Living Future conference in Seattle or Portland or Vancouver each year, and the kids went and told their story there about what it feels like to try and engage, to try being engaged in your community and have it fail. And the result of that was they challenged the audience to come up with 50 examples of authentic youth engagement in their planning practices or their industry within 1 year's time. And so this little town of Jasper heard back from companies like Amazon and the city of Portland and how they engaged youth into the design of current projects. And so that was a real win. So then it took off from there, and someone in the audience, a Seattle-based architect, ended up coming to our small town and then getting our kids to help design the first ever self-sustaining portable classroom. So the kids were learning architecture beyond LEED Platinum, and they were all able to articulate that, and they were all working on that, and then they saw it built. And the next time we went to the conference, it was the main focus of the conference, and it was built there in downtown Seattle. And so for our kids, that was a huge, obviously, life changer. So since then, I saw what they were able to do. I had high school kids designing net zero energy plans for industrial and office building use. It's mind-blowing that they were able to do this kind of work, because I certainly would not be able to do that when I was in high school, I don't think. But
how did you know there was a demand for that? How did you, because I love the fact that it's student-driven, and that in some ways we talked about industry partnerships. What does the industry need, and then define the industry. But you tapped into a student. How did you know there was going to be a demand for what the students were doing?
Well, I mean, I think we tapped into a couple things. We tapped into the rebellious nature of youth, where they got shunned and they were like, oh yeah, and they put up their middle finger and they showed what they were able to do, and the results. And then we ended up failing a bunch more times, but it's this idea that, adults don't think we can do this type of thing, and here's youth to show you what we are really capable of doing. I think the other piece that we're missing here, and you guys have touched on this maybe without even acknowledging it, is that students don't have a sense of place. They don't have any sense of community anymore. They don't recognize themselves as a, whatever community they're from. Unless you're from a small town with a lot of pride or something like that, there really is nothing, and maybe it's a sports team thing sometimes that works, but they have zero connection to the land. They have zero connection to the outside businesses in their community. They don't know what's going on, and so they have no sense of place. When you have no sense of place, when you have no sense that you have any control over what happens in the place in which you live, then they don't care about it, and they're less likely to work in those fields. They're always looking for a way out. They don't see no possibility in their own community. So you guys are already touching on this idea, especially in a small town where it's like they're basically growing up learning that this is our community identity. This is, we can grow and live here and stay within our community for the rest of our lives. And I think that's a really powerful message. Relationship to nature as well.
Yeah.
So our
Being connected.
This conference, for example, I'm under these bright lights and we haven't been outside yet today. This is not a natural way to learn. And so we are not modeling that, but it's like, with industry partners, this gets you out of the classroom as much as possible. So you want to tear down the walls of the classroom as much as possible. So we partner with external organizations like the Canadian Wildlife Federation, Y2Y, which is Yellowstone to Yukon, where we work on wildlife corridor patterns, and kids are working on reintroduction of species that have been eliminated, and they go out in the field and they learn from scientists. Yeah. So
Well, I mean, it's really important as we think about these partnerships that is good for industry, that's meeting a local demand, but actually means something to the students and connect with the students. And so what's the bridge there is fascinating. I'm going to open it up for you all to kind of ask questions, and I have some questions for people in the audience. But before we do, let's whip around and say, what's one that's bombed? Like, what's an industry partnership that you set up and was pretty much a disaster, and why? Anyone can jump in.
I'll jump in. I don't. It's still too early to call it a true disaster.
I mean, it's just like it wasn't worth the time, because everything that you all have said is the amount of time and energy, and you have so much on your plate. It has to, it has to be worth it for you all, and just didn't, wasn't a net positive.
I'll speak to our partnership with O'Moore College of Design. As a STEAM school that prides itself on embedding art into a STEM curriculum, creating a holistic learning model. Very excited about this partnership with O'Moore, which is a private college in Franklin, Tennessee. It's an art school, So we were excited about bringing a conceptology class down to Mount Pleasant, where students could earn dual credit. And I just noticed that, especially in the early years of this model that we're in, a lot of it, when you're the face of the organization, when the building leader is the catalyst for a lot of these relationships, you also have to spur the program along as well. So when you're pulled in a lot of different directions, whether it's just managing the books, butts, and buses of a school, to casting the vision, to driving some of these other high-profile partnerships, there's going to be some that fall by the wayside. And O'Moore was one that I could still, we're still partnered with them, but it's not after almost a half a year where I would like it to be in terms of growing that particular partnership and program. I've just noticed that you have to be careful of hitting the law of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
And make sure that you keep a certain number in there that you can actively, work to the best of your ability without letting them fall off.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing I put as another design principle, because I'm taking notes here, is you need to staff it, right? You need to have bandwidth to do that. If everything falls, I hear your point, Ryan, about leadership to engage in industry, and they want to see the school leader, but then if you don't staff it appropriately, then the follow-up, the follow-through, a quality experience for both kind of falls down, and I've seen things falter, and so it's another great point.
Absolutely.
Any lessons learned from some not such great partnerships, Jayda, that you could reflect on? We don't have to call the name of the partnership. This is being filmed.
I'm trying to think of some examples of some things along the lines that would.
Or you learned lessons learned
Some
along
lessons
the way.
learned, and feeding off what he was talking about, leadership. As a leader of your school, ensuring that if you set up those business advisories, what we call them, business advisory committees, that your teachers are following through with staying in contact and what they say they're going to do with that business industry, that they do that, because then those connections will lose faith with your programs. And so part of what I do is I ensure that I'm going back and checking and looking at the notes, the minutes of those meetings, and looking, what did you all agree to do? Okay, when is this going to happen? Because that can quickly cause something to fail if there's not a follow-through. Another thing, if you get to a point where you built such a strong program and you are doing internships, where I've seen kind of where the wheels kind of run off the car a little bit, is when you don't place students appropriately in those positions. I'll give you an example in something like an automotive industry. You have those technicians making money based on how fast they work through car problems, what they're fixing. And if you have a student that is not strong and not ready, do not have the skills to go into that position and be placed with a person for an internship, well, they're slowing them down, and you're cutting into their pocketbook, and they're not going to want to keep working with you. So you have to make sure that the students that you are working with and you're getting ready to follow through with this, you have them at a level that they're ready to represent your program. Okay? That's just a couple of, I guess, side notes along that.
No, that's great. That's great. You have anything to add on this one, Adam?
Sure. I think that it's important to understand that an industry partnership, you want to vet the industry partners,
Yeah, as
especially if they're working with students. So part of my job is to curate or to liaise between the students and the industry partners. I think that's really important. So quite often an industry partner will think that their role is to come to career day. And career days, you know, they're fantastic and all, but they're not super engaging for students anymore. This is straight out of the mouth of students. Meaningful partnerships.
Say that again. What was straight out of the mouth?
Career day is not very engaging.
Yeah.
They're boring, man.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
So-
a lot. But defining the roles for an industry, like, okay, yeah, we'll be partners. When's career day? Like, that's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
So what you're saying is curating, managing the roles and responsibilities and what you expect
Right.
is.
So there's they don't often know how to interact with students in meaningful ways, and so you need somebody on those front lines to sort of direct what that is going to look like and how they can liaise, and same with the students, how a student can liaise with outside organizations. So I've had some horrible failures with industry partnerships, but probably the worst one was with our government and
Surprise.
yeah, well, you know, sometimes you get a little too idealistic, I guess, and we had elected members of official tell students that, why are you working on this? Nobody cares anyways. You know, that type of threatening.
Yeah.
If you cause any delays to this process, we'll pull the funding and give it to somebody else who wants it right now. And you know, you wouldn't believe this type of thing would actually be said to students who are super engaged and confident in their learning, but it happens regularly, or sometimes they put up a fake process, token engagement. So in a design of a school, for instance, we went through the whole architectural design and planned where everything would go, and we talked about rooftop garden, all these great things. And then we found out after the process that the school had already been designed, you know, from some sort of system, and they just talked with the kids in order to
Appease them, but
appease them
it
and check that box.
didn't really have a meaning.
Yeah. So I've seen it all. I've seen every end of the spectrum.
Okay.
To really positive outcomes. So yeah.
I'm going to invite some of you into the conversation and kind of share what you've seen worked or hasn't worked, and then we'll like open it up for questions. But why don't I turn to my friends from Gwinnett and maybe share some stories from, you know, how you're connecting with industry, and how do you make it value add? How do you make it, you know, hit your goals? What have you learned? What are some missed opportunities? Would just love for you all to speak to your experience.
I have tremendous respect for what Ryan's been able to do in a rural area and growing a program. You know, we have the luxury of being situated in a major metropolitan area in metropolitan Atlanta. And our school district is in a county where there are hundreds of Fortune 500 companies, and we are within driving distance of Georgia Tech, Emory, Georgia State, Georgia Gwinnett College, Gwinnett Tech, and so many other areas of higher education. And so our school's 11 years old. We focus on accelerated STEM. And in our founding documents that our school used to get off the ground included this notion of internships. And so Peter mentioned that we have 2 full-time staff members that manage that program, and it really is a 9 through 12 experience. And so, you know, what's going on in Tennessee, where you have an innovation lab on the campus that mirrors the innovation lab in the industry partner, you know, that is critical. And so everything being industry standard, if the kids are using the same software in their 3D modeling class that Pixar is using to create videos, you know, that is invaluable because they're getting the same classroom learning that they would get with the kind of tools, skills, and content knowledge contextualized that they would get if they were actually an entry-level position. And so aligning the outcomes and sort of, in the last session we talked about where do you want them to be and then backtrack that all the way down to maybe even your feeder programs is really, really critical. One of the other things that is important, I think, that we have been able to do at our school specifically and that we've talked about here is lighting sort of a passion in kids. Not every kid has to do everything available at your school, and a lot of the more ambitious ones want to take every AP class or every advanced program or complete every pathway that your school offers. And so limiting the scope of what they do and increasing the depth to which they go is really, really important, I think.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because Ivy, in some ways we've heard a lot of kind of grow your, like, get a toehold into a partnership and grow them. And what you all, let me just understand this, is like you do have an expectation that all 11th and 12th graders will do these internships as part of an extension of their curriculum. And so you have literally hundreds that you've got to set up for the students. So you're very explicit in what you're expecting of the industry, and then you have these 2 full-time people to go out and help match. Is that correct?
It is. It's a graduation requirement
Yeah.
that the students coming in before they even start 9th grade know that they have to do. It's articulated in print. You know, they and their parents, you know, sort of sign the enrollment form that they know that they have to do it, and then everything is an arrow pointing to that. Whether it's an advisement lesson in the middle of the 9th grade, a component of peer mentorship in the 10th grade, whatever is going on in that layer of learning over the course of 4 years points toward the same end goal, which is completion of these internship experiences, which are graduation requirements.
So I guess it's not an either or, like toehold, grow it over time versus very specific. I mean, you know, Jayda talked about a game plan. You do have a very specific game plan, a specific ask, and then you can have very targeted, and it's another way. It seems obviously different ways to approach it. How about from some of our friends from around the globe? How do you all approach industry partnerships, and what's been effective from your standpoint? Any lessons learned? Now, New Orleans isn't from another part of the world, although some people think it's another part of the world.
We are from about 20 to 25 minutes outside of New Orleans, and we're lucky. The school district that my high school is located in has 2 high schools that run one on the west bank of the Mississippi River, the other on the east bank. We are a heavily industrialized area. We have 2 of the largest refineries in the country, Valero and Shell, and our partner in education is Shell. However, we do use a lot more of the industries up and down the river, including chemical industries and things like that. We've been real successful with our partner. I think we can do more, but our partner actually partners with 3 other schools in our district, which I think is a disadvantage to us, but we're the high school, so they help us in a number of ways. Recently, and I'm not going to go all through the number of ways they help us, but recently they've been approaching us with what the needs are in their industry, not just Shell, but Valero and a few of the other businesses in the area. And say, for example, we need instrumentation techs, and we just recently begun an instrumentation tech course, instrumentation class, P-Tech, process tech. They're bringing it to us and actually helping to fund those classes, including the teachers, in where we're moving, because that's what our industry and our area needs. So we're providing for them. They provide money for us, a lot of money. Shell does. We have a great robotics program, and a number of industries have jumped on that because it's very visual. You know, we're out there in the community, and we have one of the tops in the country, but because they're being in the news, the businesses want to jump on board in that. So we're getting a lot of support from the other industries and businesses in the area. We have a career development facilitator in our school, and I was just talking to my colleague here, from Destrehan High School also. She's been made to do a lot of other things, and I know we can utilize her more. She's fantastic. She's our partner in education chair, but she's also in charge of the mentorships, the job shadowings that we do there, the internships with all the businesses and industry we have in there. But money is big. For example, Energy just donated $10,000 to our robotics program, but they also donate their time as mentors in working with the robotics program.
That's helpful. Not only having resources to connect, but you're actively listening to what their needs, and they're seeing you make adjustments, because then that actually gives them incentive. How about someone else who wants to share? One of our colleagues, maybe from Switzerland, or
I just want to jump in 1 second and say I've also had experience where industry sought to shape the education that was being given, and that's not always a great thing.
Yeah.
So we.
Well, you bring a.
So in Alberta, we have the third largest supply of oil in the world, and so obviously there's an oil and gas component to our economy. It's a huge part of our economy. But when I began teaching about the environment and things, I was told to teach that climate change wasn't a real thing, and that was part of the industrial. You need to meet this requirement in order to receive the money, and so I would be cautious of where you're steering your school system to align with industry. It has to. I think industry in a backwards way would also benefit if you didn't align it with industry, because big industry tends to evolve and develop very slowly. So they say, like in the oil industry, for example, if there's a new technology, it takes 15 years for it to actually be implemented, because they're so slow to create change. And so by giving students the keys to be change makers and be resilient, be adaptive in other ways, just those core concepts, instead of really specific things, it's probably going to benefit everyone in the long run. So that's my 2 cents.
And I guess my pushback there, not even pushback, just a curious nature there would be, you had mentioned steering your districts away from doing that. As a building leader, as an executive lead principal, I'm going out and looking for these partnerships, and not going through, my central office. Now, I housed the $500,000 in a bank, in a central office bank account earmarked for what we're doing. But, really the idea here is to be autonomous, and to ask less of that superintendent, less of that school board. And I think that can skirt some of those issues where, districts may align themselves with certain power players that then influences your curriculum and things like that. But when building leaders are taking that bull by the horns, and it's hard to argue with success. So you're gaining these industry partnerships, you're implementing them in such a way that's creating these incredible outcomes for kids. It goes back to this original idea of allowing then a true partnership, not a one-sided, hey, we'll only do this, we'll only give you X amount if it looks this way. I mean, that's not a partnership then, and the idea is here that we have to be able to organically build this and develop it and design it together so that it can be best for everybody and create great outcomes. And I also wanted to affirm, that compliment earlier regarding developing these partnerships in a rural community. I did about 11 years in East Nashville, a school called Maplewood High School. And ironically, one of the conversations I had with Parker Hannafin up front was we had a incredible partnership with Bridgestone Firestone inside Maplewood, where we put a working Firestone in a major metropolitan high school. And that's really where the idea came from, that I wanted this innovation lab to mirror the innovation lab in Parker Hannafin. But people ask me all the time, what's the difference between rural and urban poverty? Because I'm dealing with an 80 to 85% free and reduced lunch population. I'm talking destitute rural poverty. Chickens coming in and out of the house, pig pens literally next to the homes, things like that. And my reflection is always that, inner city, although I would say there's definitely an incredible amount of more violence, but there's also an incredible amount of more access to opportunities and programs, mentors, plugins, where in the rural environment, there's just absolutely no access. I mean, there's nothing. So the difference there, the disparity there is just that. I mean, it does take double the effort to attract these kind of partners and build these kind of relationships and partnerships when you're in that rural setting. So thank you for saying that, because that is truly an innate challenge.
Great. Well, we have about 5. Great. You want to give the microphone? Please share, and then we're going to have 5 minutes of questions before we wrap up.
I'll be quick. So I'm Paul. I work at the International School of Zug and Lucerne. The situation that you talk about is totally different than what we have. We have a school of about 1,400 students. We're across 2 different campuses. Most of our students stay there for an average of 3 years. They're not disadvantaged students. They are all from fairly wealthy American, British parents, a lot of Dutch, Scandinavian parents. And so the background is, the profile is so much different. Mm-hmm. We are starting up a program now as part of the IB program, the career-related program. And so we're slowly making partnerships with some employers like Johnson & Johnson, Glencore, not so hot on them, some other companies too, but so we're a fee-paying school, so we're hesitant to take money from schools, from companies. We don't need it to survive or anything. We don't need it to do all that. So our partnerships would be much more like almost family partnerships, where the parents work at the companies and they'll just kind of like be mentoring much more. So it's kind of, the problem we have is we just bought a new building. We have problems that you probably don't, like we bought a building that cost like $25 million. Right, and now one of our things for the next 5 years is, how do we make this building into much more than just a school, but a place where it now takes education to the next level. And so I think this is where the partnership from companies that are around us will come in, and we will work with them to see how we can develop education and develop innovation at the same time.
Yeah. What's the when those? That's what I was going to ask you. So keep going on that. Like, what's the goal then? It's a mentorship. It's exposure. Is it like to create spark innovation? And what would be the goals?
It's just everything's new right now. We're
new.
starting a committee to do all this to investigate. But there are a lot of people at our school who are very wary about partnerships in Switzerland. Not just Switzerland, but partnerships with some of these institutions. They wonder about how much they will influence what we do, because right now we're autonomous. It's like, again, we have our partnerships are more like, we have 8 companies that we deal with, and their employees, their kids get first choice to come to our school, right? That's our partnership. Our partnership is, we never ask for funds or anything like that from them. So now we're probably moving in a different direction, where we're trying to think like, so our goal, our challenge will be, how can we get these companies into our schools to help us innovate our career-related program, and even farther down in middle school and primary. So it'll be something interesting, but that's a 5-year plan.
10 minutes, yeah.
So
Great.
It's a different kind of
It's different, yeah.
problem than you have in here in some of your schools in America. But it's once again, it is a challenge, and I think
Gotta work.
we don't look at it. I think we have to stop looking at it as a challenge and more as an opportunity.
Gotcha. Anybody else like to share before we ask questions of the panelists? Yes.
Hi, I'm Kathy. I'm the assistant principal
Of
at
his-
the school in
yep.
Calgary with Adam. And I think that he has not blown his own horn
Yeah.
good enough in terms of partnership and partnership development. He is very much an encourager of our students, and he has partnered with the government of Alberta in that he has encouraged some of his students to write a white paper on climate change and that student involvement in climate change. They did present that to the Energy and Environment Minister, who went to the Paris climate change talks, and that was presented at that point in time. There was also that Skype session with 5 schools from around the world to discuss youth involvement in climate change and what does that look like for youth and how are they involved in that. Excuse me, they've also had audience with the Premier of Alberta in that same discussion. And so that partnership that he has with government is about what students are doing and what's important to them and how they, can become future leaders within our province.
I think that's incredible. I think it's incredible. And in this whole conversation, I really appreciate this perspective of it has to engage and interest the students and driven by the students, and it means something to them. And that we have this balance of, yes, we want to have industry partnerships. We want to kind of work with government and industry in a way, but it can't just be their agenda. It has to be what the students care about as well. And there has to be a marriage. So I really appreciate this perspective that you brought.
Yeah,
to
and
this
there's also
conversation.
that on a solar panel project, Adam has another student who felt that was something that was super important. So not only with the government, but also with our Calgary Board of Education. And the implementation of some solar panels on 3 of our brand new builds. What does that look like? And again, what is the importance of it? So not just that partnership with industry, but also partnership with government. And super powerful for kids.
And the partnership really is 2 ways, and it empowers them to be leaders. That's great. We are about to wrap up, but does anybody have any questions for the panelists? No, we have time. I'm saying we just have a couple minutes. What'd you say? Yeah, we're going to be doing the survey. This is the survey question, right? No. There's a link. Okay, do it. It's the next slide. Got you. Okay, I've got my own closing. So go ahead. Yeah, please.
No, I was going to say thank you for the panelists. What you're doing is incredible. But in Colorado, we're lucky enough to have a group or organization that was created, CareerWise Colorado, about 18 months ago, 24 months ago, thereabouts, because we found as schools, the time is everything, as we all know, and it's so precious. The governor of Colorado took it upon himself, and really with others' helps, to take a piece out of what the Swiss do. And granted, you said it best. I mean, we are not the Swiss. We are not Asia. We are not other countries for what we do and the students we serve. But the fact that an organization like that came on, where we can call up and say, hey, we need help with this. What about this partnership? What about this? What about this? And Gretchen Morgan, who is actually the leader of CareerWise Colorado, is fortunate enough, I believe, to be here tomorrow to be on a panel or to speak of some sort. But for the panelists, did you guys find the endeavor of doing this yourself just too much, or what assistance did you maybe get from your state officials or other people and companies like that to help, if you had anything like that?
I'll jump in and give a quick anecdote regarding like the NASA deal that we did. Signed a 3-year partnership with NASA as part of their Hunch program. That was a culmination of people, not government related, but I had a retired NASA guy living in Mount Pleasant that wants, it's all about traction, right? It's about momentum. I mean, you want to get to that point of inertia. When the Parker Hannifin deal went public and we really started to kind of get some panache behind us, You know, he approached our community development director, who also happens to sit on our school board and represent Mount Pleasant, and said, I have a contact at NASA and would love to plug the principal in with NASA. So there was a connection there that then developed that. I mean, I still had to bring Bob Zeke out from the Marshall, Space Center and show him and sell him, and so repeat process that I explained with Parker. But at least we had some help there. Other than that, no. Versus say the Nashville model, where you have the academies of Nashville and they have the Pencil Box Foundation that vets all the partners that come in. We don't have anything. So that goes back to my original assertion that the principal or the building leader has to be the face of the organization and has to go out and both sell the vision, develop the relationships, and then kind of finesse the partnerships as they go along. Does it consume a lot of time? I think it definitely does. Practically, it does. Is it worth that time, though? Yes. And I think that's where you get into the distribution of work, right? And making sure that we're putting our energy and efforts into the best lanes that produce outcomes for students.
Jayda, and we're gonna transition, but I know you were looking to jump in there.
Yeah, I was. You talk about, of course, I believe the administrator does need to be the face of that also, but you also have to look at the fact that a lot of your teachers have some expertise in those areas. And for instance, a lot of our programs have oversight. You have Bureau of EMS, Health and Hospitals, NATEF, and I'm sure you can think of a number of oversight over some of your programs. Those are some places that also provide that help. So, don't count out those industries, those types of industries, oversight industries, I guess what you call it. Those can be your first point of contacts. Your teachers may already have developed those relationships with those those sectors there to give you names of other people in those areas that can help you. And a last little thought that came to me as I was listening to this, flexibility. Everything doesn't just happen during the school day. You're going to have to step outside of your regular school day time and step into those business partnerships time, because you may have to go to them to start honing some of that and not wait for them to come to your school at your time. And so we found a lot of that flexibility was a big deal.
Great. Well, that was wonderful. This was a great conversation, and the title of the session was Design Principles for New Industry Partnerships and Lessons Learned. I think we talked about that. A couple of things, again, just some of these design principles that I heard from the group. This was actually really interesting, what just came up, is like from CareerWise Colorado, it could be an intermediary that kind of navigates this. It could be like in Gwinnett County, where you have staffing that are in the schools that can do it, or in the Nashville example, or it's just by the force of will by great educators in buildings that are making this happen because they see the benefit of it. So there's a way to kind of do this. The actual design principles we came up with was you got to have a concrete game plan of how you want to engage. You have to manage the relationship. You have to invest time. These take time, but they can net a huge reward. It has to meet the industry's need. It can't just be what we want, and it also has to be driven by what students want as well. We can't just have an agenda. And you need to staff it, like we just talked about, like what's the infrastructure to maintain. One thing Jayda brought up really clearly with her industry councils, there needs to be constant communication. You can't just launch the partnership. There has to be an effective way to check in and maintain it, and each of these leaders has done that. And then appropriate placements came up, that once you have a partnership and you want to engage students, someone has to be doing that matching function. And then we talked about active vetting as well, that has to be part of this as well. You can't just say, oh, industry this, industry that. Well, why? What's the most important one? Why are we doing it? Then they have to be vetted, that you guys can kind of a mutual agreement. So this is wonderful. I just want to, before we transition, we're going to do the survey, but I want to just first of all thank our great panelists for giving their time. Can I give them a round of applause?